Hi, thank you for joining me today. We're reading A Course in Miracles, the main text. We've been doing this on Sundays now for quite some time. We're currently on chapter 13, The Guiltless World. This is the introduction. If you do not feel guilty, you could not attack, for condemnation is the root of attack. It is the judgment of one mind by another as unworthy of love and deserving of punishment. But herein lies the split. For the mind that judges perceives itself as separate from the mind being judged, believing that by punishing another, it will escape punishment. All this is but the delusional attempt of the mind to deny itself and escape the penalty of denial. It is not an attempt to relinquish denial, but to hold on to it. For it is guilt that has obscured the Father to you, and it is guilt that has driven you insane. The acceptance of guilt into the mind of God's Son was the beginning of the separation, as the acceptance of the atonement is its end. The world you see is the delusional system those made mad. Oh, I'm sorry. The world you see is the delusional system of those made mad by guilt. Look carefully at this world, and you will realize that this is so. For this world is the symbol of punishment, and all the laws that seem to govern it are the laws of death. Children are born into it through pain and in pain. Their growth is attended by suffering, and they learn of sorrow and separation and death. Their minds seem to be trapped in their brain, and its powers to decline if their bodies are hurt. I don't like that sentence because it doesn't really make sense to me. I'm going to read those two sentences again. Their growth is attended by suffering, and they learn of sorrow and separation and death. Their minds seem to be trapped in their brain, and its powers to decline if their bodies are hurt. There's something wrong with that sentence. I'm not sure what they're trying to say there. There's a typo or something. Their minds are trapped in their brain, and the brain's powers decline if their bodies are hurt, I think is what it means. They seem to love, yet they desert and are deserted. They appear to lose what they love, perhaps the most insane belief of all. And their bodies wither and gasp and are laid in the ground and are no more. Not one of them but has thought that God is cruel. Not one of them but has thought that God is cruel. If this were the real world, God would be cruel, for no father could subject his children to this as the price of salvation and be loving. Love does not kill to save. If it did, attack would be salvation, and this is the ego's interpretation, not God's. Only the world of guilt could demand this, for only the guilty could conceive of it. Adam's sin could have touched no one had he not believed it was the Father who drove him out of paradise. For in that belief, the knowledge of the Father was lost, since only those who do not understand him could believe it. The world is a picture of the crucifixion of God's Son, and until you realize that God's Son cannot be crucified, this is the world you will see. Yet you will not realize this until you accept the eternal fact that God's Son is not guilty. He deserves only love because he was given only love. He cannot be condemned because he has never condemned. The atonement is the final lesson he needed to learn, for it teaches him that, never having sinned, he has no need of salvation. Section 2 of chapter 13, The Guiltless World, Guiltlessness and Invulnerability. Earlier, I said that the Holy Spirit shares the goal of all good teachers, whose ultimate aim is to make themselves unnecessary by teaching their pupils all they know. The Holy Spirit wants only this, for sharing the Father's love for his Son, he seeks to remove all guilt from his mind, that he may remember his Father in peace. Peace and guilt are antithetical, and the Father can be remembered only in peace. Love and guilt cannot coexist, and to accept one is to deny the other. Guilt hides Christ from your sight, for it is the denial of the blamelessness of God's Son. In the strange world that you have made, the Son of God has sinned. How could you see him then? By making him invisible, the world of retribution rose in the black cloud of guilt that you accepted, and you hold it dear. For the blamelessness of Christ is the proof that the ego never was and can never be. Without guilt, the ego has no life, and God's Son is without guilt. As you look upon yourself and judge what you do honestly, you may be tempted to wonder how you can be guiltless. Yet consider this. You are not guiltless in time, but in eternity. You have sinned in the past, but there is no past. Always has no direction. Time seems to go in one direction, but when you reach its end, it will roll up like a long carpet spread out along the past behind you and will disappear. As long as you believe the Son of God is guilty, you will walk along this carpet, believing that it leads to death. And the journey will seem long and cruel and senseless, for so it is. The journey the Son of God has set himself is useless indeed, but the journey on which his Father sets him is one of release and joy. The Father is not cruel, and his Son cannot hurt himself. The retaliation that he fears and that he sees will never touch him, for although he believes in it, the Holy Spirit knows it is not true. The Holy Spirit stands at the end of time, where you must be because he is with you. He has already undone everything unworthy of the Son of God, for which was his mission, given him by God, and what God gives has always been. You will see me as you learn the Son of God is guiltless. He has always sought his guiltlessness, and he has found it. For everyone is seeking to escape from the prison he has made, and the way to find release is not denied him. Being in him, he has found it. When he finds, it is only a matter of time, and time is but an illusion. For the Son of God is guiltless now, and the brightness of his purity shines untouched forever in God's mind. God's will always be as he created. God's Son will always be as he created. Deny your world and judge him not, for his eternal guiltlessness is in the mind of his Father and protects him forever. When you have accepted the atonement for yourself, you will realize there is no guilt in God's Son. And only as you look upon him as guiltless can you understand his oneness. For the idea of guilt brings a belief in condemnation of one by another, projecting separation in place of unity. You can condemn only yourself, and by doing so, you cannot know that you are God's son. You have denied the condition of his being, which is his perfect blamelessness. Out of love he was created, and in love he abides. Goodness and mercy have always followed him, for he has always extended the love of his Father. As you perceive the holy companions who travel with you, you will realize that there is no journey, but only an awakening. The Son of God, who sleepeth not, has faith with his Father for you. There is no road to travel on and no time to travel through. For God waits not for his Son in time, being forever unwilling to be without him. And so it has always been. Let the holiness of God's Son shine away the cloud of guilt that darkens your mind, and by accepting his purity as yours, learn of him that it is yours. You are invulnerable because you are guiltless. You can hold on to the past only through guilt. For guilt establishes that you will be punished for what you have done, and thus depends on one-dimensional time, proceeding from past to future. No one who believes this can understand that what always means, and therefore guilt must deprive you of the appreciation of eternity. You are immortal because you are eternal, and always must be now. Guilt, then, is a way of holding past and future in your mind to ensure the ego's continuity. For if what has been will be punished, the ego's continuity is guaranteed. Yet the guarantee of your continuity is God's, not the ego's. And immortality is the opposite of time, for time passes away, while immortality is constant. Accepting the atonement teaches you what immortality is, for by accepting your guiltlessness, you learn that the past has never been, and so the future is needless and will not be. The future in time is always associated with expiation, and only guilt could induce a sense of need for expiation. Okay, I apologize. I had to look that word up because it's not a very common word, and it's not a word I'm really too familiar with. So I did not pronounce it correctly. It's expiation. It's spelled, for those of you that are listening and not following along in a text, it's expiation. And the definition from Merriam-Webster is the act of expiating something is the act of extinguishing the guilt incurred by something, or the act or process of making atonement for something. So it's the perfect word, obviously. I'm going to read this whole paragraph again so that I can pronounce the word correctly as I go through. Accepting the atonement teaches you what immortality is, for by accepting your guiltlessness, you learn that the past has never been, and so the future is needless and will not be. The future in time is always associated with expiation, and only guilt could induce a sense of need for expiation. Accepting the guiltlessness of the Son of God as yours is therefore God's way of reminding you of his Son and what he is in truth. For God has never condemned his Son, and being guiltless, he is eternal. You cannot dispel guilt by making it real and then atoning for it. This is the ego's plan, which it offers instead of dispelling it. The ego believes in atonement through attack, being fully committed to the insane notion that attack is salvation. And you who cherish guilt must also believe it, for how else but by identifying with the ego could you hold dear what you do not want? The ego teaches you to attack yourself because you are guilty, and this must increase the guilt, for guilt is the result of attack. In the ego's teaching, then, there is no escape from guilt, for attack makes guilt real. And if it is real, there is no way to overcome it. The Holy Spirit dispels it simply through the calm recognition that it has never been. As he looks upon the guiltless Son of God, he knows that this is true. And being true for you, you cannot attack yourself, for without guilt, attack is impossible. You then are saved because God's Son is guiltless, and being wholly pure, you are invulnerable. Chapter 13, Section 3, The Guiltless World. The Guiltless Son of God. The ultimate purpose of projection is always to get rid of guilt. Yet characteristically, the ego attempts to get rid of guilt from its viewpoint only. For much as the ego wants to retain guilt, you find it intolerable, since guilt stands in the way of your remembering God, whose pull is so strong that you cannot resist it. On this issue, then, the deepest split of all occurs. For if you are to retain guilt, as the ego insists, you cannot be you. Only by persuading you that it is you, could the ego possibly induce you to project guilt and thereby keep it in your mind. Yet consider how strange a solution the ego's arrangement is. You project guilt to get rid of it, but you are actually merely concealing it. You do experience the guilt, but you have no idea of why. On the contrary, you associate it with a weird assortment of ego ideals, which the ego claims you have failed. Yet you have no idea that you are failing the Son of God by seeing him as guilty. Believing you are no longer you, you do not realize that you are failing yourself. The darkest of your hidden cornerstones holds your belief in guilt from your awareness. For in that dark and secret place is the realization that you have betrayed God's Son by condemning him to death. You do not even suspect this murderous but insane idea lies hidden there, for the ego's destructive urge is so intense that nothing short of crucifixion of God's Son can ultimately satisfy it. It does not know who the Son of God is because it is blind. Yet let it perceive guiltlessness anywhere, and it will try to destroy it because it is afraid. Much of the ego's strange behavior is directly attributable to its definition of guilt. To the ego, the guiltless are guilty. Those who do not attack are its enemies because by not valuing its interpretation of salvation, they are in an excellent position to let it go. They have approached the darkest and deepest cornerstone in the ego's foundation. And while the ego can withstand your raising all else to question, it guards this one secret with its life, for its existence depends on keeping this secret. So it is this secret that we must look upon, for the ego cannot protect you against truth, and in its presence, the ego is dispelled. In the calm light of truth, let us recognize that you believe you have crucified God's Son. You have not admitted to this terrible secret because you would still wish to crucify him if you could find him. Yet the wish has hidden him from you because it is very fearful, and so you are afraid to find him. You have handled this wish to kill yourself by not knowing who you are and identifying with something else. You have projected guilt blindly and indiscriminately, but you have not uncovered its source. For the ego does want to kill you, and if you identify with it, you must believe its goal is yours. I have said that the crucifixion is the symbol of the ego. When it was confronted with the real guiltlessness of God's Son, it did attempt to kill him. And the reason it gave was that guiltlessness is blasphemous to God. To the ego is God, and guiltlessness must be interpreted as the final guilt that fully justifies murder. Yet you do not understand that any fear you may experience in connection with this course stems ultimately from this interpretation. But if you will consider your reactions to it, you will become increasingly convinced that this is so. This course has explicitly stated that its goal for you is happiness and peace, yet you are afraid of it. You have been told again and again that it will set you free, yet you sometimes react as if it is trying to imprison you. You often dismiss it more readily than you dismiss the ego's thought system. To some extent, then, you must believe that by not learning the course, you are protecting yourself. And you do not realize that it is only your guiltlessness that can protect you. The atonement has always been interpreted as the release from guilt. And this is correct if it is understood. Yet even when I interpret it for you, you may reject it and do not accept it for yourself. You have perhaps recognized the futility of the ego and its offerings, but though you do not want them, you may not yet look upon the alternative with gladness. In the meantime, you are afraid of redemption, and you believe it will kill you. Make no mistake about the depth of this fear, for you believe that in the presence of truth, you might turn on yourself and destroy yourself. Little child, this is not so. Your guilty secret is nothing. And if you will but bring it to the light will dispel it. And then no dark cloud will remain between you and the remembrance of your Father, for you will remember his guiltless Son who did not die because he is immortal. And you will see that you were redeemed with him and have never been separated from him. In this understanding lies your remembering, for it is the recognition of love without fear. There will be great joy in heaven on your homecoming, and the joy will be yours. For the redeemed Son of Man is the guiltless Son of God, and to recognize him is your redemption. Chapter 13, The Guiltless World, Section 4, The Fear of Redemption. You may wonder why it is so crucial that you look upon your hatred and realize its full extent. You may also think that it would be easy enough for the Holy Spirit to show it to you and dispel it without the need for you to raise it to awareness yourself. Yet there is one more obstacle you have interposed between yourself and the atonement. We have said that no one will countenance fear if he recognizes it. Yet in your disordered state of mind, you are not afraid of fear. You do not like it, but it is not your desire to attack what really frightens you. You are not seriously disturbed by your hostility. You keep it hidden because you are more afraid of what it covers. You could look even upon the ego's darkest cornerstone without fear if you did not believe that without the ego you would find within yourself something you fear even more. You are not really afraid of crucifixion. Your real terror is of redemption. Under the ego's dark foundation is the memory of God, and it is this that you are really afraid. For this memory would instantly restore to you Let me try this again. For this memory would instantly restore you to your proper place. And it is this place that you have sought to leave. Your fear of attack is nothing compared to your fear of love. You would be willing to look upon, even upon your savage wish to kill God's Son, if you did not believe it saves you from love. For this wish caused the separation, and you have protected it because you do not want the separation healed. You realize that by removing the dark cloud that obscures it, your love for your Father would impel you to answer his call and leap into heaven. You believe that attack is salvation because it would prevent you from this. For still deeper than the ego's foundation and much stronger than it will ever be is your intense and burning love of God and his for you. This is what you really want to hide. I really have to stop right here and clarify something, because it's just really bothering me the way this is written. It's I believe very misleading and troubling. It isn't that you want to hide it. What's happened here, and this is a foundational problem that I have with this writing, because it talks about how we created the ego, as if individuals created the ego. And we didn't. The ego is a function of our body. It's our housing. It's a function of our housing. And so to really understand the ego is to realize that the housing that our spirit inhabits has wiring that comes with it. Now, whether this was an unintended consequence of creation or whether we thought this through ahead of time, it's not clear to me. But the housing that we inhabit comes with an ego, and the ego is the thing that is in charge of protecting us. It's what runs the wiring. So we're wired to respond when we're frightened in 3 ways. We freeze, we flight, we run, and I'm blocking on the 3rd one right now because I didn't intend to talk about this and didn't plan this talk ahead of time. It's fight, flight, and freeze. So when our bodies or our egos sense an attack, the wiring is one of 3 things. We are either going to fight back to protect ourselves, we're going to freeze out of fear, or we're going to run, flight. So all of this talk about the ego is, I think, more easily understood if you think of the ego in that way, that it's your housing, it's the wiring of your housing. Your spirit inhabited this body, and the body has a mind of its own, is the easiest way to think of it. And your spirit is what is, this lesson is, and what this whole course is trying to connect you back to your source of spirit. But you're living in this housing that's interfering with you all the time. And so, and I'll go ahead, since I've stopped and I'm talking as opposed to reading, I'll go ahead and share this little tidbit. As a child, I had no guilt. And the reason I had no guilt was because I remembered where I came from. I was born knowing that I'm spirit in a housing. So my experience of life has been totally different from anybody else's I've ever met, because I've known all along. I haven't understood it, but I've known it all along, that the housing is one thing and the housing's doing something. Meantime, spirit is doing something else. So I hope that that helps clarify a little. Feel free to reach out to me if you would like some more conversation about this. So it isn't that you want to hide. It's that this is the function of the ego. It's the ego does not know that there's a spirit involved here. The ego thinks it's in charge of this body and of you and to keep you safe. I'm going to start reading again here. In all honesty, it is not harder for you to say, in all honesty, is it not harder for you to say, I love, than I hate? You associate love with weakness and hatred with strength, and your own real power seems to come to you as your real weakness. For you could not control your joyous response to the call of love if you heard it, and the whole world you thought you made would vanish. The Holy Spirit then seems to be attacking your fortress, for you would shut out God, and he does not will to be excluded. You have built your whole insane belief system because you think you would be helpless in God's presence, and you would save yourself from his love because you think it would crush you into nothingness. You are afraid it would sweep you away from yourself and make you little because you believe that magnitude lies in defiance and that attack is grander. You think you have made a world God would destroy, and by loving him, which you do, you would throw this world away, which you would. Therefore, you have used the world to cover your love, and the deeper you go into the blackness of the ego's foundation, the closer you come to the love that is hidden there, and it is this that frightens you. So when we surrender to spirit, it can be a frightening experience, and I believe that's what it's referring to here. Let go and let God. We don't know what the outcome is, and our ego wants to control the outcome. Our ego wants to know where we're going. Our ego wants to plan, wants to understand. And so to allow yourself to move into this place where you are spirit in action and not being ruled by your body and your ego, it is frightening. This is my interpretation of this text. Reading again. You can accept insanity because you made it, but you cannot accept love because you did not. You would rather be a slave of the crucifixion than a son of God in redemption. Your individual death seems more valuable than your living oneness, for what is given you is not so dear as you made it. You are more afraid of God than of the ego, and love cannot enter where it is not welcome, but hatred can, for it enters of its own volition and cares not for yours. You must look upon your illusions and not keep them hidden, because they do not rest on their own foundation. In concealment, they appear to do so, and thus they seem to be self-sustained. This is the fundamental illusion on which the others rest, for beneath them, and concealed as long as they are hidden, is the loving mind that thought it made them in anger. And the pain in this mind is so apparent when it is uncovered that its need of healing cannot be denied. Not all the tricks and games you offer it can heal it, for there is the real crucifixion of God's Son. And yet he is not crucified. Here is both his pain and his healing, for the Holy Spirit's vision is merciful and his remedy quick. Do not hide suffering from his sight, but bring it gladly to him. Lay before his eternal sanity all your hurt, and let him heal you. Do not leave any spot of pain hidden from his light, and search your mind carefully for any thoughts you may fear to uncover. For he will heal every little thought you have kept to hurt you, and cleanse it of its littleness, restoring it to the magnitude of God. Beneath all the grandiosity you hold so dear is your real call for help. For you call for love to your Father, as your Father calls you to himself. In that place which you have hidden, You will only unite with the Father in loving remembrance of him. You will find this place of truth as you see it in your brothers, for though they may deceive themselves, like you, they long for the grandeur that is in them. And perceiving it, you will welcome it, and it will be yours. For grandeur is the right of God's Son, and no illusions can satisfy him or save him from what he is. Only his love is real, and he will be content only with his reality. Save him from his illusions, that you may accept the magnitude of your Father in peace and joy. But exempt no one from your love, or you will be hiding a dark place in your mind where the Holy Spirit is not welcome. And thus you will exempt yourself from his healing power, for by not offering total love, you will not be healed completely. Healing must be as complete as fear, for love cannot enter where there is one spot of fear to mar its welcome. You who prefer separation to sanity cannot obtain it in your right mind. You were at peace until you asked for a special favor. And God did not give it, for the request was alien to him. And you could not ask this of a father who truly loved his son. Therefore, you made of him an unloving father, demanding of him what only such a father could give. And the peace of God's Son was shattered, for he no longer understood his Father. He feared what he had made, but still more did he fear his real Father, having attacked his own glorious equality in him. In peace, he needed nothing and asked for nothing. In war, he demanded everything and found nothing. For how could the gentleness of love respond to his demands except by departing in peace and returning to the Father? If the Son did not wish to remain in peace, he could not remain at all. For a darkened mind cannot live in the light, and it must seek a place of darkness where it can believe it is where it is not. God did not allow this to happen. Yet you demanded that it happen, and therefore believed that it was so. To single out is to make alone, and thus make lonely. God did not do this to you. Could he set you apart, knowing that your peace lies in his oneness? He denied you only your request for pain, for suffering is not of his creation. Having given you creation, he could not take it away from you. He could but only answer your insane request with a sane answer that would abide with you in your insanity. For his answer is the reference point beyond illusions, from which you can look back on them and see them as insane. But seek this place, and you will find it, for love is in you and will lead you there. So I think we will stop at this point, and we will pick up next Sunday at section 5, the function of time. And in the meantime, let me say that if you want to discuss this, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me either via text 907-351-3003 or on Facebook or on YouTube. And we can talk about this some more. This is not easy material to work our way through. And I hope to be able to make it easier for you. So let me know how it's going. I'll look forward to seeing you next Sunday. In the meantime, namaste.